welcome back to the deep dive. I have to say, right off the bat, if you are listening to this right now, you need to hit that like and subscribe button.
Absolutely.
Seriously, do it right now. Because the algorithm, well, it does not like what we are about to unpack today.
Yeah.
We're diving into something that feels less like a typical book review and a lot more like we've just unsealed a classified document from an active war zone.
It certainly reads exactly that way. It's dense, it's very aggressive, and it is completely unapologetic about its stance.
Yeah, we are looking at the explosive new ebook by Conrad Riker, and get ready for this title, because it tells you exactly what you're in for. It's called Tyrannical Safety, Suicidal Empathy, Totalitarian Authoritarian Control, the Karen Commissariat and Secret Reports.
A title that really doesn't pull any punches.
Not a single one. And I want to be super clear up front here. This book is available right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. Frankly, after you hear the details we're going to break down today, I think you're going to want to go buy the full text immediately.
Because reading the primary source is really the only way to get the full map out of this.
Right. Because what Riker is describing in this text isn't just some vague cultural shift or a political disagreement. He's describing a war. And the book argues that if you are a man in the modern world, especially a man who follows these kinds of red-pilled manosphere topics, you are currently operating in enemy territory.
That is the core premise of the entire work. Riker isn't offering a self-help manual here. He explicitly states that this is war reportage from the front lines of the gender wars. The central argument he makes is that our society hasn't just drifted to the left or, just become a little too sensitive.
It's been captured.
Exactly. Captured by what he terms a feminist Marxist fusion. And he argues this fusion has weaponized the very concept of safety to exert total totalitarian control over men.
Okay, so let's pause there for a second. Feminist Marxist fusion. That sounds, like a lot of academic buzzwords just thrown into a blender. What does Riker actually mean by that? Because usually when we think of Marxism, we think of class struggles, rich versus poor, the workers seizing the means of production. And feminism is about gender. So how does the book say they fuse?
It's a really crucial distinction to make early on, so you understand the history of these institutions before they were captured. Riker argues that traditional economic Marxism basically failed in the West because the working class was just too comfortable to revolt.
They had cars and houses, so no revolution.
Right, so the ideology had to shift its target. Instead of bourgeoisie versus proletariat, the framework became oppressor versus oppressed, but based entirely on identity. In this specific fusion, the book argues that men have replaced the capitalist as the inherent systemic oppressors.
And women replace the workers as the inherent victims.
Precisely. The fusion is about using the state apparatus, the bureaucracy, HR departments, the legal system to redistribute power from men to women. And it's not based on merit or competence or labor, but based on a perceived historical grievance. It is class warfare, but the class is gender.
So in this framework he's building, a man simply existing, going about his day, is viewed as an act of aggression.
Yes. Just as a capitalist simply existing was an affront to a communist, a man demonstrating autonomy or competence or strength is an affront to this new bureaucratic system. And the weapon they use to dismantle him isn't a hammer and sickle.
It's the concept of safety.
It's safety.
And I want to clarify this for everyone listening. When we say safety in the context of this deep dive, we aren't talking about hard hats, we aren't talking about guardrails or making sure a bridge doesn't collapse.
No, not physical safety. And that is a critical distinction Riker makes. We're talking about safetyism. He defines this as a totalitarian ideology that prioritizes emotional safety above all objective reality.
Emotional safety.
Right. It's a system where subjective feelings, and he argues specifically female feelings, are allowed to override legal rights, due process, and basic logic.
He calls this the glass cellar, doesn't he? And the gynocracy.
Yes. We always hear about the glass ceiling for women, this idea that there's an invisible barrier keeping them from the very top. But Riker argues that men are currently living in a glass cellar.
Men are just falling right through the floor.
Exactly. Society, according to the book, has moved from a patriarchy, which literally means rule by fathers, to a gynocracy. And this gynocracy is a system of soft totalitarianism. It's not run by a dictator in a military uniform. It's run by bureaucrats.
HR officers, school administrators, social workers.
The functionaries.
Which brings us to the main vocabulary word of the day. A phrase that kept popping up in the text that, honestly, it made me laugh at first, but then it actually kind of terrified me. The Karen Commissariat.
It's a highly effective term. And he is very careful to distinguish this from the casual internet meme.
Right, he's not talking about a lady with a bad haircut yelling at a teenage barista because her latte is too cold.
No. He's describing a very defined, decentralized network of institutional functionaries. We're talking teachers, nurses, HR directors, DEI consultants who use their administrative power to enforce female supremacy.
And commissary, that refers to the old Soviet political officers, right? The guys who stood behind the front lines with rifles to shoot anyone who retreated.
Or to ensure strict ideological purity, yes. In the Soviet Union, the commissar's entire job was to make sure the soldiers and the workers were thinking the correct thoughts.
Right?
Riker argues that the modern HR director or diversity officer serves the exact same societal function. They don't actually produce anything. They don't build houses. They don't code software. They don't sell products.
Their sole function is to police the language and behavior of the men who do the actual work.
Ensuring that those men conform entirely to feminist norms.
So let's unpack this Karen commissariat and this whole concept of safetyism in practice. Because the book makes a really bold, chilling claim. It says that the phrase, "I feel unsafe," has become the nuclear code of the modern era.
It is the ultimate administrative trump card. In the source material, Riker explains that saying, "I feel unsafe," allows a person to instantly bypass logic, evidence, and any semblance of due process.
Just by saying those three words.
If a woman claims she feels unsafe, the entire machinery of the state and the corporation grinds into motion to neutralize the perceived threat. And it doesn't matter if an objective threat actually exists.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second, just to represent the other side of the argument. If someone says they feel unsafe, shouldn't we as a society listen to that? I mean, gut instincts evolved for a reason. If a woman is walking down a dark alley at night and feels unsafe, isn't that a valid primal instinct?
In a pure survival situation, absolutely. Trust your gut, run away. But Riker argues that we have taken a very specific biological instinct, and we've codified it into law and corporate policy in perfectly well-lit, physically safe environments.
Right, the office isn't a dark alley.
Exactly. The issue the book points out isn't that the feeling exists. The issue is that the feeling now carries the legal and administrative weight of hard evidence.
Ah, I see.
If you feel unsafe in a dark alley, you run. That's prudence. But if you claim you feel unsafe, simply because a male coworker disagreed with your marketing strategy in a brightly lit boardroom, and then HR fires that man based solely on your feeling.
That's what crosses the line.
Riker argues that is tyranny. That is elevating subjective vibes over objective reality.
The example from the book that really blew my mind regarding this exact dynamic was the Seattle Police Department's Karen protocol. I honestly thought I was reading satire when I hit that page.
It sounds like a parody, but it's not. Riker cites a leaked 2019 training manual from the department. The protocol specifically instructs responding officers to de-escalate female callers with empathy, while simultaneously maintaining visible authority over male suspects.
Okay, let's break down how insane that is. A woman calls 911. The police show up to the house. They literally just walk through the door. They don't know who did what yet.
They have zero facts.
Right. It could be a verbal argument. It could be mutual combat. She could be the primary aggressor who threw a plate at his head. But the protocol dictates they don't figure out the objective reality first.
No. The protocol predetermines the dynamic before any investigation happens. It assumes by default that the female caller is the victim who requires soothing and empathy, and the male present is the inherent threat who must be physically dominated.
It effectively turns the taxpayer-funded state police into a private, armed security force for her emotional management.
Precisely. The core assumption of the system is that her emotion equals his legal guilt. If she is visibly upset, he must be controlled. The man is treated as a suspect by default, simply because his existence in that moment is causing her discomfort.
Wow.
And Riker connects this directly to what psychologists call the women are wonderful effect. It's an innate biological human bias to side with women and want to protect them. The book argues that the state has consciously weaponized this biological bias to strip men of their right to due process.
Which brings up that insane incident in Queens back in 2023, the smirk incident. This one, to me, really highlights the absolute absurdity of how far this has gone.
It is a textbook example of safetyism in action. A grown woman called 911, the emergency police line, because a teenage boy walked past her on the sidewalk and smirked.
He smirked at her. That was the whole crime.
That was the entire allegation. He didn't say a single word to her. He didn't touch her. He didn't follow her. He just had a facial expression that she personally didn't like.
And the police didn't just hang up the phone. Or tell her, to grow up and stop wasting city resources.
No, they dispatched units. They responded to the scene. And according to the details in the book, the police spent 19 minutes questioning this teenage kid, practically interrogating him, insisting that he apologize to this adult woman for making her uncomfortable.
19 minutes. For a facial expression. While actual crimes are probably happening down the street.
This is exactly what Riker means by the Karen Commissariat. The police officers in that moment weren't enforcing the law. They were acting as armed enforcers of her subjective feelings. The crime wasn't harassment.
The crime was bad vibes.
It was a look. And Riker analyzes this entire interaction through an evolutionary psychology lens. He calls it female hypergamy and threat perception.
Okay, hypergamy and threat perception. That sounds very technical. Break that concept down for the listener.
So hypergamy usually refers to the sociological concept of women marrying up, seeking a partner of higher financial or social status. But Riker applies this instinct to the use of physical force.
How so?
In our ancestral environment, a woman generally couldn't physically dominate a male rival. She needed a stronger man, a husband, a brother, or a tribe leader to commit violence on her behalf. Fast forward to today. The state is the strongest man in the room. The state has the monopoly on violence. The state is the apex alpha.
Oh, I see where this is going.
So when a woman feels slighted or disrespected by a teenage boy's smirk, she doesn't confront him herself. She appeals to the apex alpha. She calls 911 to have the state proxy crush the subordinate male for her. She is using the police as a proxy husband to enforce her social status.
That's a genuinely terrifying way to look at it, because if that's true, it implies that the police aren't actually there to keep the peace or find the truth. They are just there to enforce a social hierarchy where she is inherently at the top.
Exactly. It criminalizes male existence.
Right.
If your resting face looks mean or arrogant or insufficiently deferential, you're suddenly subject to state intervention.
And it's not just about looks or expressions, it's an attack on male competence. Riker brings up the lawnmower incident in Colorado. A guy was fined $500 for mowing his own lawn at 8 a.m. on a Sunday.
Now, 8 a.m. on a Sunday is early, sure, but the book points out it was not legally a noise violation in that municipality.
So what on earth was the fine actually for?
The fine was issued by the HOA because 3 different female neighbors complained that the mere act of him mowing his lawn caused them severe stress.
Stress from a lawnmower.
Riker argues that this wasn't really about the decibel level of the noise, it was about the symbolism of the act. Think about what a man mowing his lawn represents on a primal level. He is standing on his own property. He is operating heavy machinery. He is taking natural chaos, the overgrown grass, and he is imposing order on it through his own physical labor and competence.
Right.
He is completely autonomous. He isn't asking anyone for help. He isn't convening a committee meeting to discuss the lived experience of the grass.
He's just getting the job done.
And that raw, unilateral autonomy is deeply offensive to the Karen Commissariat. They thrive on interdependence. They thrive on bureaucracy, on process, on permission. A man acting independently and competently is a direct affront to their control matrix.
Homeowners Association.
Which Riker hilariously notes is the natural native habitat of the Karen. They couldn't stand the sight of a man acting completely outside of their administrative control, so they punished the autonomy itself, not the noise.
It's an attack on the very concept of a man doing his own thing. It's an attack on self-reliance. And if you're listening to this and thinking that's bad for grown men, just wait until we get to what this exact system is doing to boys. This next section of the book, part 2, the war on boys, honestly, it made my blood boil reading it.
It is perhaps the most disturbing and heavily documented part of the text. Riker argues that our institutions are systematically criminalizing boyhood itself.
Let's talk about the grilled cheese incident. I have to tell the story for you guys listening because I still, to this second, cannot believe it's real. This happened in Texas in 2023.
A father was at home, and he let his 10-year-old son make a grilled cheese sandwich on the stove.
A completely normal thing. I was cooking eggs at 10. Most of us were riding bikes across town by ourselves at that age.
But in this specific case, a social worker, who Riker explicitly points out, was unmarried and had no children of her own, caught wind of this and deemed it a severe safety risk. Child Protective Services actually showed up at this man's door.
A cheese sandwich?
They formally flagged the father because the 10-year-old child was quote-unquote unsupervised near a heat source. Riker uses this horrific overreach to illustrate the institutional shift from what used to be the reasonable parent standard to the new reasonable bureaucrat standard.
Break that down. What's the difference between those two standards?
Historically, the law used the reasonable parent standard. It asked, is this action something a normal, loving, everyday parent would allow? Letting a 10-year-old use a stove? Yes, obviously. But the new reasonable bureaucrat standard asks a totally different question. Is there any conceivable scenario, however mathematically unlikely, where this action could result in a lawsuit, an injury, or a PR nightmare? If the answer is yes, the action is forbidden. Bureaucrats are professionally risk-averse.
And they don't care about the child's development.
Exactly. And Riker notes that the people making these life-destroying calls are increasingly from that childless, divorced demographic. They have absolutely no skin in the game when it comes to raising capable humans, yet they've appointed themselves the supreme arbiters of all parenting.
Which ties perfectly into the Michigan father who was literally arrested for child neglect.
Because he let his kid walk to the park.
By himself.
Yes, a 0.6-mile walk.
Yeah.
A 10-year-old boy walking less than a mile to a neighborhood park in broad daylight. And the father was handcuffed and arrested.
This is exactly what Riker refers to as the safety trap. We aren't protecting these kids from actual kidnappers or predators. We are protecting them from their own independence.
We are protecting them from developing competence. Riker makes a profound argument here. Boys become men through engaging with risk. You climb a tall tree, you fall out of it, you learn how gravity works. You use a pocket knife, you cut your thumb, you learn a deep respect for the blade.
You learn boundaries.
If you surgically remove all risk from a boy's environment, you permanently prevent him from upgrading his mental operating system to man. You keep him trapped in a permanent, docile state of infant dependency, which makes him very easy to manage.
And this indoctrination, it starts the second they step into a classroom. Riker describes the modern public education system as a feminist leviathan.
He cites an unbelievable case from Ontario where a 10-year-old boy was given a formal out-of-school suspension for giving a classmate a high five.
A high five? How do you suspend a child for a high five? Did he hit him in the face?
No. A female teacher witnessed it and officially labeled it inappropriate physical contact.
You have got to be kidding me.
The book argues that boys inherently express themselves through physicality. Roughhousing, wrestling, high fives, constant movement. Biological. But the modern school system, which the text notes is dominated by female teachers at a rate of 78%, views as totally normal male behavior as a dangerous pathology.
They treat the classroom like a minimum security prison.
Exactly. A prison where quiet compliance is the only recognized virtue. When these teachers see a boy reaching out to high-five a friend, they don't see male camaraderie, they see incipient violence. They see a threat to their orderly environment.
So they are actively teaching young boys that their own bodies are weapons, that their natural, healthy instinct to touch and bond with their peers is somehow morally bad.
It is creating an entire generation of young men who are touch-starved and fundamentally terrified of their own physical presence in the world. And then, of course, there's the overt ideological programming. Riker highlights the pronoun round incident in Oakland.
This was the story about the third grade classroom, right?
Yes. A new school year, the teacher goes around the room. An 8-year-old boy introduced himself and confidently said his pronouns were he and him. The teacher immediately corrected him in front of all his peers, saying, "We don't assume," effectively shaming this child for being certain of his own biological gender.
And the book says the kid went home in tears.
He did.
It's like they're actively running psychological operations to break them, breaking their basic tether to reality.
That is precisely Riker's argument. He calls it a re-education camp. Because if you can confuse a young boy about the most fundamental bedrock reality of his existence, the fact that I am a boy, then you can control his mind forever. If he can't trust his own eyes and his own body, he has to rely entirely on the authority to tell him what is real.
Wow.
And Riker points out that this psychological dismantling is not happening in a vacuum. It is coupled with the systemic exclusion of boys from male-led STEM initiatives. The book cites data showing that despite strict Title IX rules mandating equality, 80% of targeted STEM funding in certain districts is being quietly funneled into female-only enrichment programs.
So, just to summarize the school experience for a boy today. You are punished for acting like a boy, you are shamed for identifying as a male, and then you are locked out of the accelerated academic programs that could actually help you build a successful future.
And if a boy naturally reacts to this incredibly hostile environment, if he fidgets in his chair, if he gets frustrated, if he stops paying attention, he isn't treated as a boy reacting to a bad system. He is diagnosed. Riker talks extensively about the pathologizing of masculinity. Normal boy behavior is slapped with a medical label like ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, or ADHD, and then medicated into submission.
The stick gun incident in Portland captures this perfectly. Just kids playing cops and robbers on the playground with sticks they found in the dirt.
And the school administration flagged it as a trauma trigger. They initiated a lockdown protocol. They treated imaginary, unstructured play as an active violent threat.
It's sheer insanity. And again, if you're listening to this right now and you're feeling that pit of recognition in your stomach, remember, you can buy Tyrannical Safety by Conrad Riker on Amazon, Kindle, and Google Play Books right now. You really need to read his full breakdown of these legal cases and school policies because we are just scratching the surface of his research here.
We really are. And we haven't even touched on the macroeconomic impact yet. Because this institutional war on male competence doesn't stop at graduation. It moves directly from the schoolhouse into the workplace.
Right, which brings us to part 3 of our deep dive, the end of merit and economic castration. This is where the rubber meets the road financially. Riker argues that the concept of diversity has completely usurped the concept of competence across the entire Western economy.
And he provides a truly chilling, real-world example from Iceland to prove it.
The firefighting team. Man, this story is an absolute tragedy.
It is. In Gothenburg, there was an elite, all-male firefighting response team. Riker notes in the text that they were independently audited and found to be 100% effective. No structural failures. Rapid response times. They were a perfectly tuned machine.
But they ran into a problem with HR?
Yes. They refused to hire a female applicant because she completely failed the mandatory physical strength requirements. She couldn't lift the gear.
Which makes perfect logical sense. If you physically cannot carry the heavy hose up 3 flights of stairs, or carry a 200-pound unconscious man down a ladder, you cannot do the job. A burning building doesn't care about your gender identity. It only cares about physics.
In a sane, meritocratic world, yes. But in the world governed by the Karen Commissariat, ideological inclusion is infinitely more important than physics. The city administration disbanded that entire elite all-male team.
Just fired them.
Reassigned or let go. And they were replaced by a mixed-gender team specifically engineered to meet diversity targets.
And what actually happened when the alarms went off?
The new mixed team took, on average, 37% longer to respond to active fire emergencies. And Riker explicitly states in the book that this massive delay in response time directly led to lost civilian lives.
People died. Innocent people burned to death in their homes because the city bureaucracy cared more about taking a photo with a woman on the fire truck than actually getting water onto the fire.
Exactly. Yet the official report from the agency praised the new initiative for successfully, quote-unquote, meeting diversity targets. This is what Riker calls the end of merit. The ultimate goal of an institution is no longer the successful outcome of its stated mission. The goal is demographic representation.
He calls it suicidal empathy.
Yes. We empathize so deeply with the woman who wants to play firefighter that we are perfectly willing to let the community burn to the ground to protect her feelings.
And this exact same dynamic is destroying hard science, too. He brings up the NIH grants.
The National Institutes of Health. In 2023, 68% of specific research grants were awarded to women.
Now, a casual observer might just think, well, maybe the female scientists just had better research proposals that year.
But Riker pulls the actual data. The data shows that men submitted 79% of the total applications. And crucially, the male applicants had significantly higher blind peer review scores on the actual hard science of their proposals.
So the men objectively had the better science, as judged by blind peers, but the grant money was still overwhelmingly handed to the women.
Correct. It was an administrative redistribution of resources based on gender, ignoring the merit of the proposals.
That's just institutional theft. That's theft of opportunity. But worse, it's theft of human progress. If you are actively suppressing the best medical or scientific ideas simply because they originated from men, you are intentionally stalling human civilization.
And it leads directly to what the book labels the corporate trap. Look at the Salesforce corporate example. Riker details in this chapter. A male project manager delivered a massive software rollout on time and significantly under budget. By every traditional metric of business, it was a massive success.
But he got punished.
He was formally demoted.
Why? He saved the company money.
Because a female subordinate filed an HR complaint claiming his quote-unquote assertive communication style made her feel stressed during the project sprint.
There is that magic word again, stressed.
Riker argues that the very definition of leadership has been rewritten to penalize men. Command presence, which has historically been absolutely necessary, To navigate a crisis or drive a high-stakes project across the finish line is now officially coded as toxic.
So what are you supposed to do?
You are supposed to utilize collaborative facilitation.
So you can't be a boss anymore. You can't give an order. You have to be a what? A glorified camp counselor.
Essentially, yes. The source material argues that this linguistic shift is a deliberate, calculated strategy to purge highly competent men from corporate hierarchies. If you are effective and driven, you are labeled intimidating. If you are direct and clear, you are labeled abusive. The system actively filters out high testosterone, high competence men and fills the executive ranks with compliant, agreeable managers who prioritize feelings over profit and won't ever rock the ideological boat.
Which forces men into what he calls the double bind. And I think every single guy listening to this deep dive right now has felt this trap closing on them at some point.
The misandrous double bind. It is incredibly insidious. Modern society constantly screams at men to be more vulnerable, to open up, to share their feelings, to stop being so stubbornly stoic. Tear down the walls, they say.
It's a trap.
It's a complete trap. Riker points to extensive data from the Harvard Business Review showing that when men actually do show vulnerability or admit weakness in a professional setting, they are subsequently rated 43% less competent by their peers and managers.
So if you remain stoic and keep your head down, you are written up for toxic masculinity. But if you actually do what they ask and show vulnerability, you are viewed as pathetic and incompetent.
Exactly. You literally cannot win. And you noted it perfectly. It's a catch-22. It's a psychological mechanism designed to keep men constantly off balance and anxious. If you lead decisively, you're dangerous. If you step back and follow, you're weak. It forces men into a state of permanent paralysis.
And if you think the corporate workplace is heavily rigged against you, wait until you hear about the legal system. Part 4 of the book deals with what he calls the family court plantation. And let me tell you, Riker does not use that word lightly.
No, he doesn't. He views the modern architecture of marriage and divorce laws as a literal form of state-sanctioned indentured servitude for men. He notes a stark statistical reality. Men pay roughly 80% of the net income taxes in this country, yet they possess zero collective political power as a voting bloc to protect their own interests.
They just fund the machine that crushes them.
He describes the Karen state using those exact male tax dollars to fund the state-sponsored alienation of fathers from their own children through family court judgments.
He spends a lot of time talking about the Duluth model. Now, I've heard this term thrown around in manosphere circles before, but I didn't realize how legally pervasive it actually was until I read this.
It is the foundational framework used in almost all domestic violence intervention programs and police trainings across the United States. Riker claims it is built on a radical feminist theory that fundamentally assumes male guilt by default.
Really? By default?
Yes. The Duluth model views domestic violence not as a complex interpersonal conflict or psychological issue between two specific people, but as a systematic patriarchal attempt by men as a class to control women as a class.
Okay, so practically speaking, if police arrive at a house for a domestic dispute, this model actively instructs them to look at the man as the inherent villain before they even ask a question?
Yes, and it gets worse. Even if the woman is actively hitting him, even if he has scratch marks on his face, the model often categorizes her violence as acceptable violent resistance to his invisible patriarchal power.
That's insane.
It creates a permanent legal lens where the man is always, by definition, the perpetrator, and the woman is always, by definition, the victim. Completely, regardless of who is actually bleeding on the living room floor.
So you are guilty simply because you possess a Y chromosome?
In practical legal application, yes. And this ties directly into the weaponization of mandatory reporting laws. Riker views these laws as the primary civilian surveillance engine of the Karen Commissariat.
Because teachers, doctors, therapists, coaches, they're all legally mandated to report any suspicion of abuse, right?
That's the key word, suspicion. Not proof, not evidence, mere suspicion. And the statistics Riker pulls are horrifying. He cites data showing that in certain California counties, the rate of entirely false or unsubstantiated reports exceeds 40%.
40% false. That is a staggering, catastrophic failure rate for any system, let alone one that tears families apart.
Almost half of all reports are baseless. And here's the absolute kicker that Riker highlights. There is zero legal penalty for the false accuser. A teacher or a bitter ex can completely destroy a man's reputation, have armed agents take his children away in the middle of the night, ruin his career, drain his bank account in legal fees, and if a judge finally rules that it was all a fabricated lie,
Nothing happens to her.
oops, just a mistake. Zero consequences for the false reporter.
The story of the Wisconsin father really drove this home for me. The push-up dad.
This is a classic, tragic example of this cultural conflict playing out. A father instructed his son to do 10 push-ups as a minor discipline for talking back disrespectfully.
10 push-ups. That is literally nothing. That's a warm-up in gym class. Frankly, it's good for the kid's health.
To you and me, and to most of human history, it is standard, healthy discipline. But to the childless, divorced female teacher who overheard the boy complaining about it the next day, to her, it was severe emotional abuse.
Unbelievable.
She immediately reported him to CPS. Riker argues she was simply projecting her own ideological discomfort with traditional masculinity onto this father's totally normal parenting style.
And the state, with its unlimited resources, backed her up.
They opened a formal investigation, they interrogated his kids, they intruded into his private home, all because a functionary felt that push-ups were, quote-unquote, too harsh.
And it's getting broader, isn't it? Because of the safety trap we talked about earlier, the very legal definition of abuse is being stretched to include something called coercive control.
Coercive control is the terrifying new frontier of family law. Riker explains that in several jurisdictions, abuse has been redefined to include non-physical things, like rolling your eyes during an argument, disagreeing on parenting styles, or managing the family finances in a way she doesn't personally agree with.
Wait. So if you sit down and argue with your wife about the monthly budget, saying we need to spend less, you can be classified as a criminal abuser.
If she claims to a judge that she felt unsafe or financially controlled by your argument, potentially, yes. Riker points out that this effectively criminalizes normal disagreement in a relationship. It hands the woman a nuclear button she can press at any given moment to instantly eject the man from his own home and seize his assets.
Man, it's just overwhelming to listen to. It feels like the walls are rapidly closing in on every single side for guys. The schools hate you. The corporate workplace wants to demote you. Your home life is a minefield. The legal system assumes you're guilty.
It is a bleak picture.
And this is exactly why you need to go buy it and read the actual book. Riker doesn't just leave us rotting in the pit. Part 5 of the book is about the cure. It's about the red pill and this concept of praxa.
Yes. This is the crucial pivot in the text, from diagnosis to actionable cure. Riker is explicitly targeting red-pilled men here. He says that waking up to this reality swallowing the red pill is only the very first step.
Right, knowing is only half the battle.
You have to deeply internalize that the system isn't broken. It is working exactly as designed to crush you. Therefore, you cannot fix it by voting harder in the next election or complaining louder in the YouTube comments.
So what is praxa then? Honestly, it sounds like a weapon from a sci-fi movie.
It's derived from the Greek word for action or practice. Riker says that complaining online is worse than useless. It's a release valve that stops you from acting. Praxa is about real-world, physical training and uncompromising self-protection. It is about building an impenetrable fortress around yourself and your mind.
He talks extensively about the silence protocol. This totally fascinated me. He claims there are 12,000 men actively doing this right now.
It is a strict daily regimen spreading through these underground networks. A 5 a.m. wake-up every single day. Immediate cold exposure, ice baths or freezing showers, hard physical labor or lifting. And here's the absolute key to the whole protocol. No speaking until noon.
Absolute silence until noon. Why silence, though? I mean, the lifting and the cold I get, but why not talk?
Riker argues that modern men talk way too much. We explain ourselves constantly. We apologize for our existence. We try to logically negotiate with the Karen Commissariat, thinking they will listen to reason.
Which they never do.
Never. In a gynocracy, words are not tools for truth. Words are weapons used against you. Anything you say can and will be twisted. If you say, I was just joking, HR logs it as he admitted to using hate speech. If you say, I was angry because you missed the deadline, the court logs it as he was verbally threatening.
So the solution is just shut up.
Silence is 100% defensible. You cannot quote silence in a police report. You cannot twist silence in an HR disciplinary meeting.
That's a great point.
But more importantly, silence builds massive internal power. Riker says that when you stop constantly leaking your masculine energy through your mouth trying to appease people, you start building immense pressure that fuels your actions. No couples therapy, no sharing your feelings with HR, just pure discipline. Riker argues vehemently that men heal through physical action and stoic silence, not through the talking cure, which he views as a highly feminized model of therapy, explicitly designed to make men weak and manageable.
It's about completely rebuilding that internal fortress,
Drink
stoicism. And then, once you're strong internally, there's the Boise Neighborhood Watch example. This is a phenomenal story of actually fighting back effectively.
It is the ultimate example of praxa in the real world. A group of men in Boise realized the police had basically stopped responding to local property crime. So they organized. They raised $187,000 entirely from local blue-collar workers.
Just regular guys.
Regular guys. They took that money and bought high-end body cams, encrypted radios and vehicles, and they just started legally patrolling their own neighborhood to deter theft.
And of course, predictably, a Karen called the cops on them.
Naturally. She called 911, claiming she felt terrified and unsafe because groups of men were patrolling the streets. She fully attempted to deploy the Karen protocol to get the state to crush them.
But it didn't work this time.
No, because this time, the men had body cams rolling 24/7. They had multiple angles of footage. They had strict operational organization. They didn't argue with her. They didn't yell.
They had the receipts.
They had undeniable high-definition receipts. And because they were organized and had documented every single second of their patrol, she was the one who ended up looking foolish to the responding officers. The men successfully protected themselves against the false report. They inverted the power dynamic through technology and discipline.
And that is the #1 strategy Riker pushes for all men reading the book. Document everything.
He advises men to treat their home life and their corporate life like a hostile business under a tax audit. Run dash cams in your car. Wear body cams if you are in a contentious situation. Keep digital, backed up receipts of every text and email.
I know some guys will hear that and think, man, that sounds paranoid.
It does sound paranoid. But given the 40% false report statistics we just discussed, Riker argues it isn't paranoia, it is baseline prudence. The camera lens is the only truly impartial witness left in America. If you are ever alone in a room with a woman in a corporate setting, or you are navigating a contentious divorce, you are at extreme risk. Documenting reality is your only shield against subjective feelings.
He also outlines the gray rock method and this concept of stealth fatherhood.
Yes, avoid public playgrounds where these busybodies act as unofficial neighborhood police. Parent your kids in private on private land whenever possible. And if you are forced to interact with the commissariat, be a gray rock.
Just totally boring.
Boring, uninteresting, completely unreactive. Do not give them any emotional fuel to latch onto. If a woke teacher tries to bait you at a parent-teacher conference, give them absolutely nothing. No anger, no debate. Just dead silence and relentless documentation.
And finally, the long-term goal. Building parallel systems. Stop begging these captured institutions for inclusion.
Precisely. If the public school suspends your son for a high five, don't waste your breath begging the school board to change their policies. They won't change. Riker is blunt. They hate you.
So walk away.
Walk away and build a male-led network. Build underground male-led homeschooling co-ops, independent care networks, parallel businesses. Riker argues we must fundamentally stop using our tax dollars and our labor to fund the very institutions that are actively trying to destroy us.
It's an incredibly powerful, galvanizing message. It's not about trying to put a Band-Aid on a fatally broken system. It's about surviving the collapse and building something entirely new on the other side.
As Riker beautifully summarizes in his epilogue, nature always corrects an imbalance. The current gynocracy punishes the exact male strength and competence that is strictly required to maintain complex civilization. And eventually, the physical infrastructure of reality dictates that that bill comes due.
You are not toxic, you are the solution. That is the single line from the book that really stuck with me.
It is a desperately necessary affirmation in a modern world that screams the exact opposite at men 24 hours a day. When the power grid goes down, nobody calls the HR department. When the bridge actually collapses, nobody cares about your preferred pronouns.
They only care about competence.
Exactly. They care about who can lift the concrete and fix the wires. And Riker is telling men, hold on to your competence, protect your sanity, preserve your strength, because the world is going to desperately need it again very, very soon.
Look, guys, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, but I promise you, we have only touched the very tip of the iceberg. The raw data, the specific citations of legal codes, the hundreds of jaw-dropping case studies, it is all in the text. You need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks right now and search for Tyrannical Safety by Conrad Riker. Buy it. Read it.
It truly is a survival manual for the modern age. You simply cannot navigate this hostile territory if you refuse to look at the map.
And you need to stay plugged into this network. Go follow Conrad Riker on his Substack right now. That's conradriker.substack.com. And follow him on Twitter at Conrad Riker. Do not let the tech algorithms hide this vital information from you.
Riker ends the book with this: silence is how the system wins, Noise, truth, logic, defiance. That's how we break the chokehold.
And that is the thought we're leaving you with today, but I want you to mull on this too. What happens to this society in 10 years when millions of young men simply decide to permanently opt out of the social contract entirely? Think about that. Hit the like button on this episode, subscribe to the deep dive to help us fight the algorithmic censorship, and until next time, keep your head on a swivel, document absolutely everything, and stay dangerous.
Stay dangerous.
We will see you in the next deep dive.